Oh,
Hey, Dimitri.
hello, how are you?
Hi, sorry, I'm a little late. I was doing a Zoom thing before and I couldn't get the guy off. I kept saying, I've got to go, get off.
Yeah, so we have about 30 minutes.
Okay, yep.
First of all, thank you for all the music because for me, it's not so often when I prepare for an interview that I become a fan of an artist, and now you're one of my favorite, well, folk rock artists,
No,
I would say.
well, thank you.
First of all, how would you prefer to be addressed? James, Jim, or Mitch?
Oh, Midge. Everyone calls me Midge. Only the tax man calls me James.
Or you're arriving here in Toronto in a week. Uh, I assume it's gonna be a mix of your solo material and your band's material, right?
It is, although someone pointed out we only started this Band in a Box tour 2 days ago. We've done two shows. And someone pointed out that there seems to be a lot of Ultravox material and more Ultravox material than solo material. And I hadn't noticed that because they're all, it doesn't matter what the name above it is. It's all, they're all my songs. So I just put together what I think is an interesting set. So yes, it will be Ultravox material, some Visage stuff, and some solo stuff.
Would you ever go for a completely solo material tour or concert?
I think it might be a nice thing to do, but again, you've got to understand, and it's something that I only realized a few years ago that no matter where you play, you know, possibly 50% of the audience don't know your stuff. They don't know all the albums. They don't know the stuff, and they've been because they're there with their you know, partners, their, you know, husband, wife, girlfriends, whatever. And they only know the hits. They might only know Vienna and If I Was or Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, and nothing else. So they're the ones that you've got to think of as well, not just the ones who know everything. The hardcore fans know every album track, and they would sit quite happily, I'm sure, through an entire night of just my material. But I think the 50% might get a little bit restless. So, because they're just waiting to hear the next song that they know. So you have to try and balance it up a little bit. But
Yeah,
it'd be an
yeah.
interesting thing to do.
But still, they go to a Midge Ure concert, not to Ultravox concert. So
That's true.
that means that they know your name outside of the band anyway.
They do, but they probably don't know the material quite as well. As I said, the one thing that runs through all the songs, whether it's Ultravox or Visage or the Rich Kids or whatever, it is me. So you go to a Midge Ure concert, you're going to get something that Midge Ure's had something to do with.
Right. Look, I have to mention one thing. I think it was 20 years ago. I was interviewing Pete Agnew, who I'm sure you know.
Pete
And
Agnew, yes.
I asked him what did it mean for him to be Scottish, and he gave me a very interesting answer. He said it means not being English, and that's enough for us. So what does it mean for you to be Scottish?
Being Scottish has nothing to do with being in Scotland. Being Scottish is your roots, it's your heritage, it's your history. There's a pride to being Scottish because I think history dictates that we were always seen as the underdog. We were always the poor relation to England, and history has created this population, this bunch of people who are strong, who are fighters, who are proud of who they are and what they are. And if you look all around the world, anywhere in the world, I remember I was in, I think it might have been Ethiopia, and I was being driven through the jungle. We came to a bridge, and the bridge was built by Scottish people. The bridge was 150 years old, but it was built in Glasgow in Scotland and then shipped out there and built in Ethiopia. And you think, well, that's what it's all about. You go to Australia. There was the Scots who inhabited Australia and New Zealand and Canada, and the Scottish heritage. It's much, much bigger than just the country of Scotland.
How does it all reflect in your music? What you say? I don't mean melodically, but does your being Scottish affect your music?
I think it does, and it's not just the melodies. I think a lot of the songs, the subject matter that I write about, stems from maybe the darker side of being born in Glasgow. We have huge religious rivalry, just like Northern Ireland, Catholics, Protestants, and I was brought up in the middle of all of this, and I could never see the point of hitting somebody because they worship a slightly different God from you. So a lot of the songs that I write are about that. But again, it's part of the rich culture that we all have. We all have these tensions, these things that happen to us when you're young. And when I moved from Scotland to move to London back in 1977, I think it was, or 78. And I'd been in London for a while, and I went back to Glasgow to go and see some friends. And they said, "Are your new friends good? Your English friends?" I said, "Yeah, they're great." They said, "What religion are they?" I said, "I've got no idea. It never crossed my mind to ask." But that kind of thing leaves a questioning that a lot of it appears in the songwriting that I do. So even the bad bits that countries have can be turned into a force for good. So I point out the ridiculousness of a lot of that stuff, and it comes out in a melodic form.
And still, I enjoyed reading your autobiography. And you mentioned that you moved away from religion anyway. But then it was interesting for me to listen to such cuts as Dear God and May Your Good Lord. And
Mm.
it's not only from the point of subject matter, it's how you made these dance tracks sound very intimate. So how did you manage that?
Well, things like, dear God and may your good Lord, it's religious imagery. Again, if you listen to the lyrics, it's questioning. Dear God is like a child just saying, it can be taken two ways. Your dear God as in a prayer, or dear God, is this what we've got? Is this what we've come to? So an exclamation. So again, it questions what people do, or certain people do, in the name of fixed religion. And it seems to cause more trouble than good. A lot of the conflicts around the world are all based on religions. They're all based on different cultures, they're all based on different skin colors. And songwriting can be about anything. 90% of songs, I'm making this figure up, 90% of songs are about relationships, about love. But songs can be about every subject you can think of. It's how you present the song and the production. And, as you say, you can turn a questioning song like that into a dance track. So it's used for good, but it still has this core questioning.
Yeah, but dance tracks usually uh, are there to move your feet. So how many people you think actually listen to lyrics while shuffling their feet on the dance floor?
Not many at all, of course they don't. So it can be a double-edged sword. There's an art, I suppose, to making something that make people move. That's what music does. It makes you move. The lyrical content, I don't think people listen to what the lyrics are saying, in a situation like that. Sitting at home with your headphones on, you might listen to the lyrics a bit more because you're concentrating on the music or you're getting lost in the music. But on a dance floor, you're probably more interested in pulling a new partner than thinking about what's actually being sung.
Yeah, I actually discussed something like that with a guy. Maybe you heard about him, Andy Fraser.
Andy Fraser.
Uh, yeah, from Free.
Oh, right. Okay. I love Andy
Yeah,
Fraser. Brilliant.
well, he liked some of my lyrics, so we were thinking about using some of my lyrics in his context, but unfortunately he died. So we discussed this thing about the subject matter in a sonic environment, and that actually moves me to my next question. From what I read in your book, and like it looks like you said that you've been working in many cases from synthesizers texture before composing a song. But when I listen to your music, not to read about what you're saying about it, it sounds to me like you're actually coming from acoustic, I don't know, structure, melody, whatever, but not the sonic texture. So uh, how do you approach
I think
composing?
I think that the thing about using electronics, synthesizers, is that you can create an atmosphere, and the atmosphere is a sonic image. So you can, if you sit, I don't sit down and write songs at a piano. I don't sit down and write them on a guitar. I have the idea of what I'd like to try and say, but I don't know how I'm going to say it yet. And then I sit with a keyboard and I create sounds. And playing the same three chords on a guitar, you play it on a keyboard on a synthesizer, and all of a sudden it's like going from black and white into Technicolor, you know. So you play the same three chords that you've just been playing on your guitar, but do it on a sound on a synthesizer, and all of a sudden it opens up. It's an image. There's an image in your head. It gives you this environment to start creating the song. And that's what I tend to do. I sit down in front of a computer, I sit down with a keyboard, and I work out melodies and textures and sounds. So when I produce a piece of music, I'm producing and writing it and working on the lyrics all at the same time. I don't write the song first, then record it. I've always, since maybe the early 80s, had my own recording facilities. So the idea that you have to write 20 songs, then choose 10 with a producer, then go in and record them all and start arranging them in the studio is completely alien to me. I wouldn't know how to do that. I sit in the studio and I create the song and the melodies and the structure and the chords and all of it all comes together over a long period of time. And eventually you finish up with a song. So it's not lyric led, it's idea led. So the idea of I want to write a song about, this car sitting next to me. So that's the idea of the song. How do I write this? I don't just go, I love this car. You have to think about what you want to say about that. But I don't write it all out on a piece of paper, then think, all right, now I'll figure out some chords. It all comes together at the same time. It's a very strange way of writing, but it's my way of doing it.
So you suggest that there's never been a single occasion where a melody and a lyric popped into your head, and only afterwards you started looking for sonic colorization of it. That's
No,
what you're
well,
saying?
in most of the cases, yes. It's the way it's worked. Dear God was the exception. I had a dream, and I heard the song. The song was in my head, and when I woke up, it was still there, which is very unusual. You know, when you have a dream and it's very vivid, and the moment you try and remember the dream, it gets further away and just disappears. You can never remember dreams. And I woke up and this song was in my head, and all I had to do was go to the studio at home and start working out what I remembered about the song. And it was that. So it was the concept of it, the questioning of it, the simplicity of it, the naivety of it, and it was all there. And all I had to do was just kind of slightly push it and mold it into the final song. But most of it it comes from something that I've read or I've seen or I've felt, and you have a phrase, you have a saying. When we did Vienna, I walked into the studio, the rehearsal studio with the rest of the guys and said, "I've got this thing." It said, "This means nothing to me," or Vienna. That was it. That's all we had. And then the band put together all the parts to create what you know now. But that doesn't happen very often. You have the seed of the idea, and I log the seeds until I can get to the computer or get to the synthesizer and start working them out.
But still, you have such tracks as oboe and piano, which, for all the beauty, sounded to me like more like essays on exploration of sound. So, was it? Did you approach them like that?
Approach what like that?
I mean, these couple tracks, oboe and piano.
Piano and Edo. Is it Edo you're talking about?
Not oboe. You have a track called oboe. I mean, O
Oboe.
B O
Yes, oh
E. Yeah,
sorry, yes.
yeah,
Oboe and piano, yes. Yeah,
yeah.
again, they were tracks that back when you had, B-sides, when it was vinyl. And the Ultravox used to do these weird things where we would all take turns at writing, creating a piece of music for a B-side. Very rarely we all did it together. So, Warren would do one, and then Chris would do one on the next single or whatever. And it was like experimental tracks. It was like I have a love of instrumental music. I always have. I find it more haunting in a way than a song, because the lyrics in a song can dictate exactly. You put a stamp on it. You say that's exactly what the song's about. Although people can interpret that however they feel fit. But an instrumental piece, it's um, it's like a movie soundtrack. It's something that you can just get lost in, and you can create your own story within that piece of music. So things like oboe and things like piano were experimenting with what was still then very basic electronics and basic home recording stuff, which is a key to it. The fact that you didn't have to book a studio, you didn't have to pay £1,000 a day or whatever it was to go into a studio to try and experiment. All of a sudden, you could start having recording at home, which is exactly where they came from. They came from messing around in the studio, learning how the equipment worked. And you experiment and you find yourself with a piece of music. You think, okay, well, maybe people would be interested in this. So that becomes an extra track on an album or a spare track or an elongated track, a bonus thing.
And your recordings with Mick Karn, what is a continuation of this exploration of sound, or just
It
something that
was
you made?
no, no. Well, Mick and I we'd started talking about trying to do an album together, and I had a house in Montserrat in the Caribbean, and Mick came out there, and we started throwing ideas around and started recording because he was such a very different type of creative musician. Mick's was wonderful, fabulous, lovely, lovely man. But his way of playing his fretless bass, he didn't know what he was playing. You couldn't say to him, "Well, can you play a B flat?" Because he didn't want to know the rudiments of music. He played what he felt. And that meant that a lot of things that he would play would kind of clash with chords that you were working on. So I would just change the chords to suit his playing because it was so unique and it was so him. It was an extension of who he was. So that in itself was experimental because it took me out of the way I would normally structure things and think, okay, well, I normally wouldn't put that chord in there, but as you're playing those notes, that's this chord works better with that. And I would, and After a Fashion, which is the track that we ended up doing together, is such a bizarre structure. But the changes in it are very odd. But I love it because just by being with him, it made me do something that I stepped outside my comfort zone to do. And that's the joy of doing collaborations, working with other musicians, because they do insist that they like what you do, but you have to adapt what you do to work with them. And we threw some ideas around, but we never finished the album, sadly. A real pity.
And even that track, I seem to hear a certain Celtic angle in that, which leads me back to this to your Scottish heritage. And I'd like to mention a couple of names that you worked with, and I mean Scottish musicians. And how was it working with Zal Clemenson, first of all?
Zal was great. Zal used to play in a band when I was still living in Scotland and playing in my first bands in Scotland. Zal was part of a band called Tear Gas, who did the Scottish circuit. So we used to play the same venues. In fact, some of the shows we played the shows together. They would be headlining and we'd be the support band or whatever. So I knew him roughly, vaguely. I'd maybe met him a few times. Um, and what happened was when I was doing my tour to support the Gift album, I'd asked Mick Ronson to play guitar because I just wanted to stand and sing. I didn't really want to play guitar at the time. And Mick Ronson was a hero. I loved everything Mick Ronson did. And it became very apparent during rehearsals that uh, Mick wasn't quite with us. I don't know what was going on, but he wouldn't play the same part twice. It would, 1 minute he'd be playing a guitar solo, the next day he'd play it on a slide, and the next minute he'd play it on a really clean, twangy guitar sound. The next minute it was all distorted, and it was too random. So I had to ask Mick not to do the tour, but I only had 2 days left before the tour started. And one of the musicians said, "Well, I've just worked with Zal Clemenson." And Zal at the time was driving a taxi. He was driving a taxi. He wasn't working as a musician. He was filling in. So he came in and learned the entire set in 2 days, and it was an absolute joy. He was a great guy to hang out with,
And
and great. We should have been in a band together back when we were kids. We should have been playing in a band in Glasgow together because that would have been quite a powerhouse, I think.
yeah, it was interesting that how did his, I would say, heavy metal clownishness, how did it work for your music?
It was great. It was great because a lot of what you do live sounds a lot rockier than the actual recordings. So there's a lot more power to stuff live. So he brought a lot to the table. His aggressive, just really digging in on his guitar. And when we did dual guitar things, it was just a joy to do. So it fitted in incredibly well, even though he had come from, the Alex Harvey band, kind of rock. He was a rock guitar god. And I was perceived as, I don't know, kind of new wave, synthesizer guy. When we both got on guitars, it was great. It was very powerful.
And another Scottish guy who I wanted to ask you about, I assume that when you worked with Phil Lynott on Yellow Pearl, that you met Jimmy Bain.
I didn't.
No?
I don't think I've ever met Jimmy Bean, which is bizarre. I think people think that, if you're from Scotland, you know everyone. But
No, it's not like you two Scottish guys worked on the same record. That's what I meant.
right. I don't think I met. Was Jimmy Bean on Yellow Pearl?
I think so.
I'm not sure he was. He may have been on the album. He may have been on
On
solo.
the album, yeah,
Yeah.
on the
So I
album,
don't
not
think
on the
I
track.
don't think he was on because there's no. I don't think he was on Yellow Pearl. It was Rusty Egan from the Rich Kids and Billy Curry from Ultravox doing the sequenced, stuff. And myself. I think that was it. I think.
Right. And Yellow Pearl, would it be right to say that you influenced Phil's move in this synthesizer influence direction from his usual hard rock?
I probably did, but I think it was at his insistence. When I did my stint with Thin Lizzy, I was on guitar to start with. Then they were looking for a permanent replacement because I was already part of Ultravox at this point. I didn't want to join Lizzy. My heart was with Ultravox, and because Philip was, in the nicest way, he was a bit of a magpie. He wanted to hang out with the Pistols when the Pistols were really cool, and he wanted to involve the synthesizer when the synthesizer thing started being cool. He liked to be associated because he was one of these guys who fitted with everything. He just everyone loved him and everyone knew him, and it didn't matter about what music you were part of, what genre of music you were part of. And he wanted me to come out on tour in Japan with Thin Lizzy while they tried out a new guitar player. And he said, "Well, I'd like you to bring the synth things, and then at the end of the set, come up on guitar and play the last 5 or 6 songs on guitar with us while we try this guy out." And that was it. So when I went off to go and go back to Ultravox to do the Vienna album, he brought in Darren Wharton then to play keyboards with Lizzy. Lizzy didn't really need a keyboard player. They didn't have to have a synth in there. It was crazy. You could never hear it. It was all, the guitar band. They should have stayed a guitar band. But, he was influenced by outside influences. That's fine.
Did you ever discuss your mutual love for Celtic melodicism?
We did, because he's him coming from Ireland and me coming from Scotland. Our histories, that the music we were brought up with was obviously traditional Celtic music, and that sense of melody and the sense of drama that Celtic history has, and those beautiful laments, those beautiful tunes that both Ireland and Scottish people have. They're slightly different, but they still have this power. This it's angst ridden. It's soulful. It's honest. It's crying for something better than you have, or crying for what you had, and that element has always been there. And I could always say that. I saw Thin Lizzy as a three-piece band when they came to Glasgow the first time ever. They came to Scotland the first time, and what they wrote in those days was incredibly Celtic. Dublin and things ain't working out at the farm, and all very melodic rock. It was great, but it was powerful melodic rock, and it was steeped in Celtic history.
And talking about melodic rock, let those slick. They were rich kids, Visage and Father on Ultravox. How each of those bands influence you? What did they add to your understanding of music, composition, whatever? What did you take from each of those bands?
Well, it's a journey, isn't it? I started out in Scotland, of course. I didn't really do anything, uh, slick. I learned never to do that again. I was very fortunate. I didn't really start for me, writing or creating or learning anything until I'd moved to London. And when I moved to London to join the Rich Kids, it was vibrant and exciting. But I bought a synthesizer in 1978. I brought a synthesizer into the Rich Kids. in the middle of the height of punk, new wave. Synthesizers were so uncool. And I brought one in there because I could see this combination of traditional rock instruments and this electronic thing. And it immediately killed the band. And I learned that sometimes you have to follow your heart. Although everyone thought I was crazy. You know, I took the synthesizer, I took the drummer from the Rich Kids, Rusty Egan, and we formed Visage with our favorite musicians, one of whom happened to be Billy Currie from Ultravox. And I saw Ultravox come back from a tour, a broken band. The singer and guitarist had gone. They'd been dropped by the record label. And that was the band I wanted to join. That was those guys taught me more about structure and being free, being loose about ideas and not being scared of trying things. So the moment I joined Ultravox was the moment that the creative lid was lifted off, and I could do anything. And I didn't have to be responsible for it. I didn't have to think about what other people would think about it. I just did it. And the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You know, we made the Vienna album, and it's still cited as one of the kind of groundbreaking albums at the time because no one expected to see it being commercially successful. No one expected to see it in the charts. Certainly not Vienna. It's too long and it's too slow and it speeds up and it's got a viola thing, it's synthesizers and pianos, you know. But it was, you know, and it changed everything. So they were the guys that I owe everything to because they taught me to not be scared and follow your heart.
Midge, look, two things I'd like to say at this very moment. One thing is that my free Zoom is gonna kick me out because it's been almost
Yeah, I can
40
see
minutes.
we're running out of time. Yeah.
Yeah. The second thing, I still have quite a few questions, and I hope it wasn't boring for you because I tried to
No, not
avoid
at
like
all.
usual things. So, could I write to Erica again and request another meeting with you?
Absolutely, it's not a problem. Not a
Yeah. So,
problem.
thanks a lot, and let's meet in a few days again. So,
All right.
thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
Dimitri.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.